of Health, DOD, which includes General Hara, Alan Oshima, DLIR, the governor's office. Did I say Alan Oshima? And yeah, and so we were able to address where there might be duplication, where the need for a recovery plan coincides with the need for testing and contact tracing. So I would say today's hearing, we were able to vet out a lot of information, and it was very instructive. I do think that before we continue to do economic recovery efforts or discussion, or before we consider opening up other industries, there needs to be a dashboard or matrix or some kind of a framework to bring transparency to the public so that everybody knows exactly what part of the economy opens up, what industry opens up under what scenario, and then under what scenario and what matrix and under what type of framework is there a rollback if there's a surge. So I think because we had those discussions, it was a very informative hearing. I'm assuming that you folks were able to get all of the hearing documents.
I'm not sure about that, but we do have, if you want that, the budget sheet that you were referring to, if
Right.
you wanted to bring it up.
Right, so if it would be helpful if, if we forward all the budget documents that we receive from the governor's office, which gives a good summary of everybody. Yeah, good summary of everything in one page. And I can tell you that, just from the discussion, Department of Health submitted its requests, but they did admit that it was duplicative of some of the things in Hawai'i. And then when we spoke to DLIR, DLIR seemed to indicate that some of those funding could be covered under Hawai'i. So one of the things that became very evident right off is the departments don't really have a good grasp of what other funds under CARES is available to them outside of 1.25 billion. So, I think that's where our staff could assist them. So for instance, one of the things that Hawai'i was addressing is PPE and contact tracing and surge capacity measures. Those things, there's a specific line item to address those things under CARES bill, and it seems that the departments did not know that they could get additional benefits outside the 1.25. So I think that is something that our office will be helping the departments with. Specifically, we understand that any type of National Guard use to help in COVID crisis is 100% reimbursed by the federal government, and we do have National Guard members who are at the convention center and who are now working at the state capitol, and those personnel would be 100% covered under the federal government. And because of that, DLIR submitted a request for $11 million in security personnel funds, but we will be helping to coordinate between DLIR and Hawai'i to make sure that those funds get utilized. Any questions? That's kind of the general framework. I can go into other specific details, but before I do, any questions?
Vicky Viotti, do you have any question for Sylvia?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was just sort of interested in knowing. I mean, there are so many sections of.
Vicky, you're muted.
Sorry, that's my trigger finger here. There was mention of the PUA funding, but I mean, I'm just sort of concerned I mean, General Hara, just like the other day, came out and said, you know, rioting in the streets and that kind of a thing. So I'm just looking for the parts of this, funding distribution that goes to these people who are, you know, desperately either waiting for their unemployment check or have lost their business, and kind of what is being done for the immediate needs of people in trouble. I mean,
Right.
I'm hearing $10 million for the Navigator, and you know, a whole lot of stuff, and yet there's this other impulse that from the population who is really quite anxious now.
Mhm. So let me address the unemployment insurance. So as some of you know that the legislature, about a month ago, we we asked the governor if we could intervene and provided our legislative staff and legislature to assist in unemployment because, you know, out of um, all the constituent concerns that we've been hearing, the cry about unemployment. And about a month ago, I think in order to even get on the system was difficult. You had hard time even calling in, and we were looking at what they were saying was around over 100,000 claims unprocessed. So overall, we had 220,000 claims, right? Because 300 came in, but about 100 were duplicative. So we overall 220,000 claims. Out of the 220,000 claims, some were rejected, and about 120,000-ish had to get processed. So that was about a month ago. And at that point in time, you know, we pretty much told the governor, you know, we're not taking no for an answer. We are going to go into your unemployment office, find out what's going on, and help you correct the situation. And I took his not, silence as his agreement for us to be able to go in. So myself and Rep Johansson went to unemployment office and talked to the staff and find out what's going on. Lo and behold, come to find out, individual to process one claim. I mean, a good individual takes about in a day, you can process about 50 to 60 claims. So we quickly did the back of the napkin math, and we said, in order to process 100,000 claims, it's going to take 11 months, and we cannot wait 11 months while people are suffering. So we went in and then we worked basically over the weekend, and we stood up the convention center, putting in 210 stations, as opposed to initially they were looking at 20 stations. So the initial processing, after 3 weeks, Vicky, we were able to process, pretty much clear the backlog in 3 weeks. That doesn't mean people, every one of those claims are paid. That just means it went through the initial correcting, manually logging on, trying to fix individual UI claims. So that was done. The next level was the individual claims. I mean, people were trying to call in because it's one thing to process the claim, doesn't mean they're going to get paid. And then now you had to figure out what is wrong with the claim. But people couldn't get on to fix their claim. So the next thing is the thing that's Scott Murakami was asking about $10 million in IT. That still has to happen in the future, and the $10 million will be included in our CIP budget bill tomorrow. But in the meantime, we have asked the DLIR office to move to a shadow cloud system. So if people log in, they're not logging in directly into the mainframe, they're logging into a different shadow system where you are not creating traffic on the state system, and the only time you touch the system is when you enter. So just in the last, I would say when they converted that this past weekend or about a week ago, it went from on average about 13,000 claims were processed, including weekly verification. So, after you do the initial processing, you have to file a weekly verification saying that you're still out of work. 15,000 claims on a daily basis could be done, but if you can imagine, 15 is nothing compared to the 100,000 that we need to do. So once we did that, and we've been tracking it and working with the unemployment office and the IT system, on Monday, we took in 65,000 claims. So 65,000 people being logging on and processing the individual claims. So the conversation from last week to now is substantially different, because now the people we have from the call center are saying, no, they were able to get their checks. Now they have different questions. The second part, so that's like the third part. The third part was a call center, because people cannot come to the UI office in person. They have all these questions. How do they get to the UI staff? The only way you can do it is the call center. So they've been slowly increasing the call center capacity. We told them, okay, that in itself is still not good enough. We, for all the 210 workstation, now we have requested that they put in phones at all the workstation, and that happened last Saturday. So when I started answering calls on Thursday, people still could not get on. On Saturday, when I worked this past Saturday, the wait time, they can only take in 100 in a queue. The wait time was still about 45 minutes to an hour. On Monday, right before we started session, I went to the call center to work. The wait time, unbelievably, it was 15 minutes. So I think we're able to clear a lot of issues between ramping up the call center, ramping up the IT, but that in itself is still gonna not clear up many issues out there. I mean, people are not getting their benefits because they had a prior misconduct issue, or the employer is saying that they didn't get laid off, they got fired because they went on vacation and never came back. So those deserve individual attention, and that's where our HMSO and drafting agencies are going and adjudicating some of these immediate things. So like in the request, you see $10 million for IT, that's in the long run, and they're asking for staff. We cannot wait for the staff to get hired. I think we need to quickly educate and train up individuals to do adjudication and clear up some of the claims. So I am concerned about PUA, because PUA, in this bill, we are appropriating $1.36 million for PUA, which is a different IT system where the self-employed and gig workers and people who got disqualified from UI can get benefits. I am a little disturbed that the PUA discussion didn't happen 2 months ago in working in conjunction with UI, and it's now being ramped up now. So those individuals who are self-employed, independent contractors, gig workers, and people who got disqualified from UI may have to wait a while, because the state is now just trying to implement an IT system. So what we envision is people who worked at the UI volunteer office will now have to move over to PUA to make sure that those checks are being cut without delay. So I know, Vicky, this is more than what you wanted to know about UI than you would have wanted. And believe me, this is much more than how I wanted to find out about UI. You know, it's so much easier if I just understand the complaints and make them do it. But, you know, I think this is a time where we all gotta pitch in, and the governor is struggling, the administration is struggling, and I mean, um, you take a bunch of bossy people at the legislature. I think in this time of crisis, that's kind of what we needed, for us to go in and just say, okay, this is how it's gonna be. And I do see many more people getting paid, and I am getting emails now about people's claim being processed. So that's like sorry, my 15-minute answer to your simple question.
Okay, thank you, Sylvia. Audrey McAvoy, do you have anything to for Sylvia?
Yes. I was wondering if you mentioned during the hearing about taking some of the CARES Act funding that Hawaii is receiving and reserving that to bolster the unemployment insurance fund, I believe. And I was wondering how much of the CARES Act funding would you like to set aside for the unemployment insurance fund?
Okay, I can answer that. So the underlying unemployment insurance trust fund had about $550 million. The entire $550 million was paid by employers. That in itself is about halfway depleted. So unless we replenish the unemployment insurance, people won't even get paid the plus up, because the state needs to provide the underlying unemployment insurance. So in this situation, we are putting in $550 million in rainy day, but we think that unless the federal government provide us with more support for the underlying underlying UI benefits, and or provide more funds to the state, we would probably need to put in the entire $550 million into unemployment. Department of Labor has put in a loan request to the US Department of Labor in the amount of $500 million or so for the month of May to cover the expense, and for the month of June, around $800 million. So as you can see from the staggering numbers, how much the underlying UI benefits cost.
Audrey, do you have a follow-up? Audrey, is that okay for you?
Yeah, I think, sorry, I'm just looking at my notes here. Yeah, I think that, yeah, just one follow-up. When will you specifically, I guess, so you'll put this in the rainy day fund, when would you need to transfer it over to the unemployment insurance fund? Would it just be when the money runs out in that fund?
Okay. So right now, we're not going to transfer the funds into unemployment. The reason for that is one of the things that the federal government requires, the US Department of Labor requires, is that in order to capture the federal borrowed monies, so that would be $500 million in May, we would completely have to deplete unemployment. But we understand that there is some conversation on the federal government that some of these borrowed money might be forgiven at some point, because it's not just the state of Hawaii, but every state is struggling with this. So, so that's the reason why we're setting aside in rainy day for unemployment insurance purposes. We are hopeful that the federal government provides assistance in forgiving some of these loans. So the recommendation in conversation with the administration and with the federal delegation was initially, let's just borrow the funds from US Department of Labor to fill the void. And then if the federal government does not forgive these loans, then we will use part of the CARES Act for unemployment benefits.
Okay,
you.
Blaze. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just said thank you.
Okay. I think Blaze, are you still with us? Do you have anything you'd like to get clarified or ask Sylvia?
Yeah, I'm still there. Thanks, Carolyn. Thanks, Chair Luke. Just a couple questions. Well, two. Chair Luke, you said the Finance Committee is going to be taking all the testimony you received today under consideration, making a decision on Thursday. Is it possible that the departments could get everything they requested today, so long as it's not duplicative?
Right. So it seems like a lot of these things were duplicative as admitted by Department of Health. So Department of Health, they came in with a request for, I think, $25 million for a state lab. The reality is we won't be able to spend. So part of the requirement for CARES funding is we have to spend the money by end of the year, and they want to see that we spend it. So I don't think we can spend it on building a new building because we're not going to spend it. We're just going to have it sit while they go out to RFP. So that request would probably be better in a CIP request. The other things that Department of Health requested, they admitted that it might be duplicative of what Hawai'i asked for. So we would have to take a look at whether it's similar to Department of Health. The other thing is Department or Hawai'i. The other thing is Department of Health asked for positions. So in order to provide them positions, we probably need to have an idea what the impact for general funds will be. So those things may or may not be considered. For the most part, I think the Hawai'i's request would probably be considered. The only troubling thing is Major General Hara admitted that he was not aware that some of the PPE and tracing and testing funds were available outside the 1.25. So we will probably put in some requirement in the bill that they draw down as much as they can outside the 1.25 before they use 100 million that will be set aside for Hawai'i, along with reporting and transparency to the public so that we know how it's being spent. Let me look at the IR. Yeah, I think that's it.
Blaze,
Okay.
did you have a follow-up or was that?
Thank you. The only other question I had, just kind of pulling back away from all this, after the Great Recession, the legislature set up an oversight commission to keep track of the federal stimulus money coming into the state. And, I know this, we're still kind of preliminary, but has there been any talk of setting up a similar commission to track COVID-19 relief funds?
I think that's a really good idea. And that's something that I think some of the committee members were thinking about, because it seemed pretty evident today that some of these departments didn't know what other funds were available. So for instance, the Burns Justice funds had money specifically for overtime for even sheriffs or other public safety folks to deal with COVID. Their hospital funds, their PPEs, there's money for food and rent subsidies, and they're in addition to the 1.25, there are potentially about $5 billion more that is included in the various CARES bills. So I think that is a terrific idea where we set up a specific office within the administration to try to maximize some of these funds that the federal government gave us. Right now under DBID, they do have an office for federal fund tracking, and you know, under governor's office, we have that I think the emergency management coordinator. So for now, before we set up a new office between those two individuals, between DBED and the governor's office, we will be asking them if they could track some of the additional funds and make sure that the departments take advantage of the non-state county funding, and then take advantage of as much federal funds available as possible.
Okay, I think it's been a long afternoon. Does anybody have any final questions for the chair? Vicky, you good? Blaze, Audrey? Sylvia, you want to ask yourself a question? No, okay.
Yeah. So, you know, thank you very much. I know it's you know, it's very challenging, and one of the things that I did want to tell you folks is, you know, I mean, there's a lot of frustration out there with the inconsistent message and not enough clear message, and this is really the time where media provides a great service to the public. And you know, I get my information from the media as well. So you know, I think during a crisis especially, we need good messaging and consistent messaging, and this is a time where you guys serve a really, really important function. So I just wanted to thank you folks.
Okay, and with that, thank you guys for joining us. We'll be in touch. Vicky, I will email you on how to get those documents.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Carolyn.